My name is Andy Haig. I'm International Director at the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce, and I also lead on the Greater Birmingham Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce, which is bringing this to you today. And this is your agenda. So for those of you that have seen this for the first time, we're going to try and keep this to about 45 minutes. Just before we start, I wanted to go through a little bit of support that the Chamber can offer you in these unprecedented times. Just to be aware, we've been working really hard back at Chamber House, and we have been putting together lots of information that we have got on our website for you. And you will see here that we have adapted our support due to the situation. So I would really like to draw your attention to the reports that we've written and all of the business advisor support that we've got that can help you. We've also got lots of up and coming webinars that I think you'll find really interesting. So throughout the month of May, we've been hosting various sessions, and I want to draw your attention to the ones that are on the screen at the moment. So we are adapting all of the subjects that we are presenting, but there's one in particular there that I think you would find really interesting as a follow-up to this particular session, which is on Wednesday, the 20th of May. This is how to prepare your business for tendering for some of the Commonwealth Games procurement sessions that we've got going on. So please do have a look at that. That's been delivered by James Sharp from the University of Birmingham, and that will be a really good follow-up to what you're going to hear today. As well as that, this week we actually launched our Global Trade Conference. That's going to be held on June the 24th. Now, we were always going to have a trade conference, but it was going to be a physical event. So we've really adapted it, and we've got some exciting sessions already confirmed for that. We're going to be looking at the theme of resuming international trade in the post-COVID-19 world. And this conference is going to be part of a whole week of international events. So please do look those up. I would now like to introduce our speaker, who is back due to popular demand, because the last time that I introduced David Grady, who's the Chief Financial Officer from Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games organisation, was when we were back at the Aston Business School at the Commonwealth Expo in February, wasn't it, David? And it was certainly a very popular session. It was standing room only, but what a different world we're in now. So it will be really interesting to now hear how the procurement side of the Commonwealth Games has updated along with what's going on in the world. So I'd like to hand over to you, David, and just a little reminder to everybody that your questions, we will try and cover as many as possible, but knowing how popular the session is, we will give you the opportunity, as I said, to email those in after the event, and we will pick up as many as we can during the chat and give David an opportunity to answer some of those at the end. So, David, over to you.
Mandy, thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm sure there's some familiar faces on there, but I can't see you, so I'll say hello to you anyway. Welcome. This is my home office. I should warn you that I am locked down with 3 teenagers, so the chances of getting through the next half hour without some form of interruption is slim, even though they've all been told this morning that it's probably best not to come crashing in. So the session today is billed as a procurement update, but I think you'll all understand that it would be slightly odd if I came and talked to you about procurement for the Games without sort of giving you some feel for how COVID has impacted where we're at. So I'll probably pick that up at the beginning before getting into the sort of the more technical aspects of the procurement process. I think probably there are two main messages I'd like you to take away from the session today. The first being that the Commonwealth Games is very much open for business. It's not quite business as usual, but it isn't that for anybody at the moment. But hopefully you'll see today that we're very much on track. And secondly, whenever I speak to you and others in these kind of forums, I always talk about the opportunity that the Commonwealth Games brings. And I think now more than ever, the Commonwealth Games represents a massive opportunity for the city and the region to recover from what has been sort of traumatic at a personal and health level, and disruptive at an economic level in a way that we could never have envisioned, even just back a few weeks ago when we were at Aston. I'll probably pause at this point just to say thank you. There won't be many of my colleagues on the call today, but for those that are there, you're part of a team that has done amazing things over the last 8 weeks to keep this programme on track. This is absolutely not what anyone envisaged as they launched the Commonwealth Games programme for Birmingham 2022, and it's been brilliant working with you all the last 8 weeks to get us to what we think is as good a position as we can be in at the current time. For all the viewers on there, if your colleagues have done as much work at the quality as my colleagues have for the last few weeks, you'll be part of a very resilient and optimistic business. So let's move forwards then. This I think is really important for us to understand about the Commonwealth Games. They arrive in a context in a city and in a region, and we've previously talked about what that context might be in Birmingham, but it's obviously changed in the light of COVID-19. And we are quickly moving together with business leaders and the civic leaders in the region to understand exactly what it is the Commonwealth Games can do for the city and region as we prepare to sort of recover from COVID in the coming months and years. And I think the overwhelming message we're getting from both national and local government is that we are very much a part of that plan, and a great opportunity for the region to bounce back to what we would previously have considered as normality. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about procurement, and in the latter half, worth just touching on the fact that our recruitment plans have been largely unaffected by the lockdown. We have started a number of people remotely into the organisation. It's tested our IT and it's tested our processes, but the good news is thus far we are on top of that challenge. And experienced people joining our team every day. The Games has always been billed as an opportunity and to come together and celebrate. And I'm not sure what could be more relevant in the current climate. Most people, I think, if you ask them what the biggest issue with COVID was, it's the lack of contact and the lack of togetherness. So we are very optimistic about sort of bringing that back to Birmingham, both for the region, but also sort of nationally and internationally, that sense of coming together. Catalyst for transformation. Well, whether we like it or not, transformation is upon us all. We are thinking thoughts now, and I'm sure it's the same in most of your businesses that we probably wouldn't have been thinking 12 weeks ago. And transformation can have a very positive effect on businesses. I've seen that in many of my past employers, and we've got to take that positive attitude towards it going forwards, and hopefully you can all share in some of the benefits that the Commonwealth Games will bring to the city and regional economy. So if you've seen me speak before, these numbers won't have changed, but I think they're relevant to consider again, because in a sense these are the underlying business case for why the city and the region wanted to host the Games in the first place. And the fact that there are some really big numbers up there probably makes the case as to why the Games in 2022 is ever more attractive as an opportunity for the city and region in a post-COVID environment. There are more than 1 million tickets. There are expected benefits to the economy of more than £1 billion. there are 41,000 games time roles. The cost to the Midlands is 3-to-1 funded by national government as opposed to local government. That's a huge investment in this region, which will be sorely needed over the next 2 years. And the procurement pipeline in the Commonwealth Games is part of how that investment gets delivered into the local region, which is why I'm delighted to be talking to you about it today. There are infrastructure projects that will deliver great regional legacy benefits. So this this is the mission of the Games, and it was devised 18 months ago. But if I just give you a minute or two to read those again, it's almost like the person who wrote those missions knew what was coming, especially when you read the first two. So the Games is absolutely about bringing people together, and we will need that more than ever. Improving health and well-being. We're going through the biggest national health emergency for 100 years. Helping the region to grow and succeed, we will be growing from a different base. That's clear. But growth is absolutely what's going to be required come 2022 and the run up to it. A catalyst for change. Well, great crises do create opportunities for change, and historically all societies have emerged stronger from them. So we intend that to be the case in this situation as well. And look, if and when we run the very successful Games we are planning, Birmingham will well and truly be on the map, because it will be a signal to the world that things are back to normal, and it's been done in this city at this time. So we are very optimistic that these missions statements will stand us in good stead over the coming months. For those of you that haven't seen me or anyone else present on the Commonwealth Games before, just a few sort of summary slides about what the Games actually is. So the Games comprises 19 sports, and within that, 8 of those sports are para sports as well as able-bodied sports. And the important thing about the Commonwealth Games, of course, is that those sports are not separate. They are same venue, same time. And very much an inclusive feel to the para events within the Commonwealth Games. Where are we going to be hosting these events? Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the Alexander Stadium in Birmingham, which is undergoing a significant refurbishment for the Games. Arena Birmingham, Edgbaston, the NEC Arena, Sutton Park for the triathlon, and the University of Birmingham for hockey and squash. So a huge amount of activity actually within the city. And then closer by within the region, Cannock, Coventry, Sandwell Aquatic Centre under construction, and Victoria Park in Leamington Spa. We sort of gloss over the one on the right hand side from a regional perspective, because obviously the velodrome that we're using for the Games will be the Olympic velodrome in London. There is one venue that is not yet finalised, which is the basketball and volleyball venue, but plans well advanced for a venue in the city for that. So on to matters procurement. I think in some ways you can't have a conversation about procurement in the OC without the first statement being made. We are an arm's length body of government. We're an arm's length body actually of the Department for Culture, Media and for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And that makes us subject to the Public Contract Regulations 2015. Those of you that have worked with those regulations will know that they're very prescriptive. But we've got a great procurement team that helps both our buying departments, but also our suppliers through the restrictions and rules of those processes. We're obviously subject to ODU spend thresholds. When we do go to market and procure, we do attribute value in our scoring to social values, and I'll talk a little more about that later. We do want to have conversations with suppliers about the potential for them sponsoring the Games as well. Whilst the Games is largely publicly funded, we do have targets around third-party sponsorship to defray some of the public cost of running the Games. And obviously, as we would always highlight when we were talking about procurement, we need to work with suppliers who are able to deliver, because we have an immovable deadline of the games in summer 2022. It's worth just reminding everybody that, as well as the organising committee, which is highlighted on the left-hand side of that screen, we've got other partners in delivering the games, and they too have significant procurement activity going on. So where the organising committee will look after its corporate services, operational game support, the temporary infrastructure, which I'll talk a little bit about later, marketing ceremonies, and all the usual costs of a business. In addition to those organising costs, Birmingham City Council has significant procurement activity in connection with its construction projects. So that's the village in the Alexander Stadium. Our friends at Transport for West Midlands are doing huge amounts of transport infrastructure investment aligned with the game's timetable. So those again represent significant procurement opportunities. And our colleagues at Sandwell Metropolitan Council are obviously running the construction of the aquatic centre. So just in terms of where the games is at, if it's hard to read, this is kind of a headcount chart, and it's quite a useful way of describing what's going on in the organising committee. I've said it before, but I make no apology. The organising committee is like a really successful startup business that is guaranteed to succeed and then fail pretty shortly thereafter, in that we will get up to the blue bar there is about 1,000 heads immediately before the games, and then a few weeks after the games we'll be back down to 50 heads. We are where the arrow shows at the current time. By the end of the year, we expect to have about 250 staff. Recruitment, whilst more difficult in a virtual world, remains possible. And in actual fact, as many of you will be starting to realise, being able to be an effective operator in a virtual world is going to be a critical skill in the coming weeks and months. So it's not that much of a disadvantage to be doing all of our interviewing over the video conferencing facilities. So we're just over 100 at the moment. As I say, we'll be 250 by the end of the year. A huge amount of the activity of those 100 people is focused around, at least in part, procurement, because all of our departments require things to deliver the games, and we'll be working with our procurement experts to get those procurements out into the market at the most timely opportunity. So we've got a slide that says business as usual. I think we'll all caveat that business as usual, but not quite as usual. What we're going to talk about in the remainder of the session is some of the specific procurements that are upcoming in the delivery of the games. It's important to stress to you all that whilst lockdown is awkward, we have continued our procurement activities in line with the plan that we had. We have had minimal delays to the procurement activity, and we expect to let contracts worth about 145 million under our plans for the remainder of the year. And obviously over the life of the games, I've given the figures before, we're in the sort of 330 million ballpark for procured activity. As I say, as a government funded organisation, we are obliged to give notification of procurements, and we do that. So please, keep your eyes on the usual channels for notifications about things that are live at the moment. Specific procurements that I would bring to your attention today. We're doing a market engagement on venue overlay turnkey. So we're after a turnkey solution to all of the temporary infrastructure solutions that we need to put around venues in order to host the games. We call that overlay. And if that is of interest to your organisation, please look out for that, and engage in the pre-market engagement that we're doing now. Uniform design and production. The uniform is a critical success factor for the games. Everybody will have an opinion on what those uniforms look like. So if your organisation is in that space, why not get involved and give us your thoughts? There's still some time left to get involved in that, and you will see that on the portal. It's just an indication of how we see our procurement pipeline panning out. There's a clear spike in the middle of the year in terms of activity. I think, we would be superhuman if things didn't shift a little bit to the right in the current situation. But actually, as I say, at the moment we are on track. Our tendering companies have performed brilliantly over the last few weeks, and it's a real testament to them as well as to the team at the OC that things have remained on track. And we look forward to working with all of those organisations over the coming weeks and months to get the procurements done that are required to host these games in 2022. So just a little bit more detail on what's on our to-do list this year in procurement. So in 2020, there's a list of the procurements that we intend to let, and it is many and varied. You'll see. So sports equipment, temporary power, look and wayfinding, technology products, fleet. So we want to hire cars. We've got to buy fuel. We need to rent depots for buses and fleet cars. We've got the turnkey, the overlay, turnkey solution we talked earlier, significant contract there. Security equipment, uniform, broadcast lighting, logistics, fixtures and fittings. So, there is a huge amount of temporary construction as well as athlete accommodation. It all needs fixtures and fittings to support that. And then some sort of technical AV equipment and services for sports presentation, all due to go to the market this year and part of that 145 million I referenced earlier. Next year, we've got additional office fit out, as obviously as the number of staff grows, the requirement to fit out additional areas of the office will come. And an unusual one, but we do need to train people to drive the fleet of cars that we'll be hiring. Park and ride services need to be procured. We've got to get insurance. Games route network, for those of you not familiar with the terminology, is the sort of the priority routes that are required to deliver athletes and officials from accommodation to games venues. Medal ceremonies equipment, that is its most basic. That is a podium for people to stand on. There's obviously more to it than that, depending on the design of those medal ceremonies. General maintenance contract will be let with a year to go, and then in the run-up to the to actual games time, we've got utilities and sort of dissolution planning for the games. So that's a sample of some of the larger contracts that you'll see. There's obviously many more contracts in that will be let, but at much smaller values. So when we are talking to suppliers and procuring, those of you that have tendered for any business before will look at that slide and think, well, that's pretty obvious stuff, and it is. If you are running your business as well, none of that will present a problem to you in tendering for business with the games. It's very interesting. We had a debate on this just the other day. We put these slides up and we think it's obvious, and then you ask yourself what financially stable looks like in the current environment, and those are challenges for us as we move forwards. But we are absolutely happy to engage with everybody on what that will look like in specific circumstances. I mentioned earlier that social values forms an important part of our procurement. We do have a social values charter. It's published, available on our website. We allocate scoring in our tenders to tenderers' responses on social value. The slide sort of indicates the things that we have highlighted in our social value as being important to us, and we will give more specific guidance in individual tenders about how we expect tenderers to respond. But whilst we are bound under PCR in terms of the fairness of the competition, we are absolutely keen to ensure local benefit arises out of the organising committee's procurement, and therefore we will be expecting tenderers to explain to us, what their bid will do for the local economy and population. So the last slide in the presentation, so I'm going to open to questions in a minute. I think if we can just leave this one up, Grace, that would be good. This is how you find out about things procurement-wise in the organising committee. So I'll leave that there for you so that you can take notes of that. But I think if I finish by just reminding everybody what the important messages of today are. One, the organising committee is very much open for business, brackets not quite business as usual, but we are still making great progress. And number two, now more than ever, the Games in 2022 is critical to the successful regeneration of the region's economy post-COVID.
Thank you, David. Okay.
So do you want me just to deal with some of these questions that are coming up? Or are they going to come on screen?
I think they're going to come on screen shortly. So whilst Grace is having a look at that, I just wanted to just slightly summarise a little bit. It was good to really hear that the procurement activity has continued in such force as it has. So that continuing as normal, or as best to normal as you can, is fantastic news for us all. Key as well for us, I think, is that there are a couple of deadlines coming up in the next couple of weeks that some people may not have been aware of. So certainly your turnkey solution procurement, and for the uniforms as well. So they're the ones that people will really need to start to look at quite swiftly. And then the spike in activity for the middle of this year, that's going to be really interesting. So I'm guessing that all of the information, David, is on the portal where everybody can see their own individual sectors and where they will have an interest in that particular procurement. Is that right?
Absolutely. We endeavour to keep that portal up to date. If you've got any questions, though, we are easy to contact. Social media, etc., and through our website. So if you think there's something and you haven't seen it, ask a question.
There's certainly a lot there already going on this year, isn't there? In particular, that does cover a broad range of industries. So particularly with the transport, logistics, the sport equipment, fixtures and fittings, the tech equipment. So there's a lot there for people to have a good look through at. We're really conscious that there will be a lot of people on this webinar that will have specific tailored questions about their industry. So we may not be able to cover off all of those right now, but we will absolutely endeavour to get back to you afterwards if there are any specific questions. Grace, have you got any questions to put up onto the screen for us? Okay, just giving her a couple of...
I've seen one come up in the chat, which was a question about what's the value apportion given to social value in our tenders. So we operate a minimum of 10% on our tender scoring to social value. We will do more in certain categories where relevant.
Okay, I think I also read one that came up early on, which was about when the other opportunities come up, and just how will Commonwealth Games procurement look at the different tiers that are involved in that? How will the tier twos get involved? Is it all the tier ones that go for the procurement tenders? or will they have to go, these smaller companies that want to get involved have to go through a tier one, or will they be able to do it individually?
So we think long and hard about lotting of larger contracts. And obviously, we're duty bound to deliver good value for the taxpayers' money. But where lotting is appropriate to break down the size of the contract to make it more accessible to smaller organisations, we're happy to do that. I don't know if there's anyone on the call who's been involved in our marketing framework. So we successfully put in place a marketing framework at the back end of last year and into early this year, which encompasses what you would consider tier one marketing agencies as well as very niche local agencies. So we're absolutely committed to looking across the size spectrum. If there was a contract that was a large contract that you would expect a tier one type supplier to get, then we'd clearly be looking to their social value returns about how they would engage the local tier two organisations in the delivery of the contract. And that will form an important part of our assessment of whether we want to award the work to them.
Okay, just looking at a couple of these, David, people are asking as well about how you communicate who has won the tenders. So I guess that there are a lot of restrictions around how you communicate.
Yes, it's a very formal process, So the award of contracts follows the standard PCR route, which is you notify a supplier, and then you have a kind of a standstill period. You notify the unsuccessful suppliers before you move into sort of signing of contracts. So yes, it's very formal by formal correspondence. So there's one on screen. When will the tender go live for games, medals, and awards? You'll excuse me, I don't have the exact detail, but clearly, with Birmingham's sort of jewellery history, we're expecting to engage the local market on medals in due course, medal design. So watch this space. There'll be a lot of interest in that one when it comes, I'm sure, and we're really looking forward to seeing what the city can do on that front. Tender for official merchandise, products, and souvenirs. I'm not sure that necessarily will be a tender in its first form, because actually it's probably going to be done through a license agreement, but that's still an ongoing conversation, and obviously more information to follow. At some point, some merchandise will need to be produced, and that will need to be procured, but a little bit of work to do internally on that one before we come to market.
We've had a question, David, as well about accommodation requirements for athletes, and will it fall as part of the tendering process, or will they be managed separately by each individual country that's involved in the games?
Well, athletes obviously get housed in the village. There is an awful lot of ancillary accommodation that is required for team officials and the workforce that comes with the games, and we are close to coming to market with that, but we're just still going through the internal conversations about the accommodation strategy.
And then we've got a question from Tom Williams on the screen as well.
Oh yes. Will there be an opportunity for refreshment services? I am sure there will be an opportunity to tender for refreshment services. That's a little bit further down the planning process, if you understand. So we're at the moment we're doing what we call venue design activity, so venue operational planning, they would call it technically, and that would involve how many food concessions do we need in a certain venue on a certain day, and obviously we need to do all of that work before we come to market.
Do you have a list on the portal at all of the contracts that have already been awarded, so that people can see how they may be able to get involved with some of the companies there?
I'm not sure that we do, but that is, I suppose it's not something we've considered necessarily, but it's a matter of public record, the contracts that we've awarded, so it's not particularly sensitive.
Okay. And then we've got a question on screen there from our Vice President of the Greater Birmingham Transatlantic Chamber of Commerce as well, Eileen Schofield.
So Eileen, thanks for your question, and thanks for coming this morning. Are there opportunities? Well, we have an exclusive legal supplier, Gowlings, who have sponsored the games and are providing legal advice to the organising committee. Professional services, we have a contracted advisor for professional services, but not on an exclusive basis. So yes, potentially there are opportunities for other professional services. Can you give an indication of the apportionment of costs for West Midlands region? Yes, very publicly stated at the when the budgets were announced for the games, the costs have been borne 3-to-1 central government to local government.
David, this is a question that came up in the previous seminars that we did together as well, regarding the use of local companies. And what's the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee's stance on that?
So, well, look, we are bound by Public Contract Regulations 2015, which doesn't, allow you to favour unreasonably local organisations. But as I said earlier, we do pick it up in our social value. So I think it is perfectly reasonable for an activity such as this to favour bids that offer greater social value in the region, and that's what we do in terms of our social value. But beyond that, the rules are the rules, and they are European-wide rules at the current time that were put in place to effectively stop countries favouring sort of domestic suppliers over EU suppliers. So we tread carefully, but we are clearly aware of the benefit that can be created in the region and committed to doing that.
Thank you. I think as well, just to reiterate that the Chamber is there to help push out the messages of all of the procurement information. So please do make sure that you get in touch with us so that we can, get you involved and ensure you've got all the up-to-date information on what's going on. Another question, will there be a matchmaking platform for the SMEs to partner with large businesses? Which, I think we've already mentioned, but if you want to elaborate, David.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I don't think there'll be a generic platform, but I think it will definitely form part of the implementation planning for any contracts that we let. So on a case-by-case basis, we will be working with larger suppliers if we appoint them to understand how they are going to deliver on their commitments. So, as I say, the social value commitments that people make at tender stage, we actually put into contracts with them. And then we obviously are going to work with them to ensure we understand how they're going to deliver on those contracts. And if the right answer on a specific contract is some form of, as you nicely describe it, a matchmaking platform, then that's what we'll work with them to achieve.
We've had a question come up on the chat box regarding schools. I'm not sure if you will be able to answer this one straight off, but there's some interest in how primary schools may be able to get involved with the games, as an example.
Well, so there is an education program. We've all games historically have had an education program, and we've been in discussion with DCMS, just understanding the scope and the budget of that program. It's probably fair to say that it's in its early stages at the current time, but historically and typically the education program is heavily linked to the mascot and the sort of marketing of the games in the local region.
Of course, and we're also looking at the legacy as well from our perspective, from a business perspective and a community, to see, from how we can develop after the games, so that it's not just the Commonwealth Games in its entirety for 2 weeks, but what we can do afterwards. And I'm sure we could work with the schools to include them in that. So thanks for that question, Birgitta. I'm conscious that we are nearing a close to the seminar, but it's as expected, lots and lots of questions coming through. We've had a question that popped up about secondary training locations as well, and if that's been considered for, I'm guessing, athletes to use during their time with us. Is that something that's been looked at, David?
Absolutely. Part of delivering a games is providing the athletes with appropriate training, training venues. Very much part of our sports department's activity is making sure that, when we've got a venue, one of the first pieces of evaluation is where will the athletes train? If that's the village and that's the venue, where's the right place to train in the days before the event? So it's probably a twofold action. So we've got the immediate obligation immediately prior to their events, but in the weeks before the games, there are other opportunities, and you may have seen some media about Commonwealth Games associations signing up with other venues to be. So I think Wales, Commonwealth Games Wales, signed an agreement recently with one of the universities in the West Midlands for that to be their pre-games training camp. So there is a kind of a lead into the games as well as the training venues at games time.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's sort of as we think, really, that there's going to be lots of specific questions, which we've just put up on the screen, the general inquiries email at birmingham2022.com. So please do, if we haven't managed to cover off your question on this seminar, please do put your question to that, and Commonwealth Games people will endeavour to answer that. Please do get in touch with us. As I said, we will continue to push out all of the deadlines as they start to approach now, particularly with this Q2 spike that we have this year, and make sure that as many of you are involved as possible. So, David, I think thank you very, very much for your participation in this seminar, our first online one together. And I hope that you'll be able to join us again sometime so that we can make sure that we're keeping up with all of this and just reiterating to everybody about these key deadlines and what to do to tender for them.
Okay, many thanks. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, everybody, and we really wish you a good afternoon.